All right, we are live. Thank you, everyone, for being here. This is the first stream of the new year. And Ben and I had discussed briefly a game that he is running and PvP and how that situation unfolded. Very intense, very emotional. And so Ben proposed it as an idea for a discussion. And so I was not a participant in the game. I'm not going to be one to really do much of the discussion, but Dethin was there. Ben is running the game. And so first, I'd like to welcome you both. Ben, welcome back. Dethin, welcome for the first time on the channel. I'm very happy for you to be able to make it.
Happy to be here.
Of course. Excited. Yeah, I'm really excited to hear about this too, because the last we had spoken, and I said this a little bit backstage, but the last we had spoken, there was a sort of planned convergence in the game that was taking place between two player groups. And I don't know how it broke down from there, but there was some PvP, there was some acts of daring do, we'll call it. So I am going to step back and allow Ben and Dethin to take it away. I will interject if I have questions for clarity. If I think that, maybe...
Please do.
Yeah, maybe the audience needs some clarity. Maybe I need some clarity. I mean, I'm part of the audience here, really. And if I have any comments about PvP in role-playing games in general, then I'll slide them in if I can, if it's relevant. But generally speaking, this is Ben's show. This is Dethin's show. So go ahead, guys. Take it away. Not to just kind of disappear like that, but... there we go. If you have any screens to share, anything like that, I'm happy to put them up. I don't know if you do. This was it was a quickly discussed topic. So if you don't have anything prepared, that's totally fine as well. It can just be conversation.
Well, I mean, I could open the game, but we'll see.
Yeah, however you feel, however you want to do it.
Yeah. So before I start, just so you are all aware, Bacon did a bunch of videos on his channel about talking about role playing as a modern myth, and it's really interesting. It's really fascinating the kind of way he kind of approaches it, and talks about how role playing could be a form of mythology or a fairy tale. So I'd recommend, if you haven't looked at those yet, you should go give them a look, because it's really thought provoking.
Thank you, Ben.
Yeah. So PvP. We all know PvP in role-playing and tabletop role-playing games is usually it's a taboo. You don't do it, or there's always that guy who engages PvP, or someone who's new to role-playing who wants to do something because that's what my character would do. And usually in the role-playing space, when you hear someone say, "But that's what my character would do," that's an immediate red flag, right? That's normally a don't do that. This guy's going to be a problem. But what I had happen, and what I actually bumped into, Craig is free to join. I can throw him the.
Hey, come on in, Craig. Hey, yeah, there he is in chat. Hey, Craig.
Here you go, Craig. Boop, boop, boop. There you go. So when someone says, when a player says, but it's what my character would do, normally a GM has kind of a panic attack because they're expecting they're going to do something horrendous. But this is exactly what happened in my last game. And it wasn't last Thursday, but it was last Thursday. But it was building up for a while. There was quite a few months of build up to it. So let's preface this. So I'm running a Halo Mythic game. It's a system by Brendan Miller. I just want to make sure I get the name right before I get crucified. Bear with me. So it's going to be Brandon, isn't it? Yeah, Brandon Miller and Michael Van Weedel. And they have made it's called 100 DOS, and it runs a system called Halo Mythic, but they also have a generalized system called Mythic, which it's essentially a very modified version of basic role playing. So it's basically Call of Cthulhu if it were Halo with extra steps, a lot of extra steps. It's a very complex system. And I have two groups. So I'm running through the Halo timeline. I have a Spartan 2 team and I have a Spartan 3 team. And the Spartan 3s in the Halo universe are children of war. And I found out today that my characters are actually a lot older than they should be, because I found out that Spartan 3s at this time should actually be 10 years old. but my player characters are all 14, and that is important. It's something that I want to highlight because we all know that child soldiers are a bad thing, and that is a bad thing. That there are horrendous moral ramifications, there's ethical ramifications, and you shouldn't do it. But in the universe of Halo, humanity is being annihilated by a genocidal, zealous alien species, and in a moment of desperation, they have recruited children from planets where their parents have been killed by these aliens and said to them, "Do you want to get revenge?" And they said yes. So they trained them to be soldiers. They gave them augments. They made them stronger, faster, better, and gave them armor that could go invisible, and were told, go, kill the monsters that killed your parents. Makes it slightly less messed up. Still messed up nonetheless. Now, there's a quote from Halo 4, and it comes from Halsey. And she says, in quotes, "A mind of a child is easy to manipulation. It's easy to meld and manipulate a child into doing what you want." And that's what they did with the Spartans. They manipulated them. Now, the tone I really wanted to set with my Halo game was morals and conflicts. We all know war is bad, and I think when we're playing in a war sim game, we might forget that war is bad. And there's moments where I've had my players throw tear gas at the enemy so they can set it on fire with a flamethrower so it explodes so they burn harder. And there's moments where the players will commit these acts of atrocious violence, but it's against aliens, so who cares, right? It's aliens. We don't care about aliens. Aliens aren't people, right? That's that will get me cancelled. But you know what I mean? That there is that detachment from it because they're not other humans, right? But the story I wanted to tell ran much darker than that. So the first day group, which is what Craig and Defin are a part of, are Spartan Freeze, and they are working with an officer from the Office of Naval Intelligence, which is basically space CIA. And the space CIA were getting them to eliminate terrorist leaders on this planet. And throughout this arc, she kept getting the group to do bit by bit worse and worse things. So they were first sent to go kill an insurgent leader, which they did, and they didn't see any problems with that because they're terrorists and they're still the enemy. Then they were sent to kill another insurgent leader, but this time they followed him home to his apartment and they broke his neck and killed him. And that's when they found out that his wife and child were still in the apartment. They kill the wife because she wakes up. And as she wakes up, she pulls the bedsheet off the bed, and the child is there. And the player character, which was Shark, had this breakdown because they didn't know what to do. If the child screams, it's going to wake someone up. Do we kill the child? Do we not kill the child? And I was sitting there, and I was like, good, here we go. They got to make a choice. So Shark is trying to think of what it is they want to do. And I sit there and I'm like, people are coming. Make a decision. You can't make a decision. What are you going to do? They end up killing the kid. It's an infant. And at this moment, we took a pause in the game. We took a stop in the game. And what I said to the group was, let's all just realize, and let's all just, understand for a minute that this is not real. This is a game, but also what we just did was very bad. And I wanted to just verbalize that that we're all playing characters that have all just done something really bad, but it's also not real. And this is the tone I'm pushing with the game. They've done some Black Ops stuff, which is highly illegal. But as far as their characters are concerned, well, at least for the majority of the characters are concerned, this is their job. And even to some of the characters, they believe that it's a child of an insurrectionist. So by extension, that child is still the enemy. Now, let's keep in mind that these are children we're talking about. They're not adults. they've been manipulated into fighting the enemy. So they really don't know any better. And what was really magical about this was that the players kind of played into that. But just to really stress and to really highlight, I acknowledged to the entire party that this is a bad thing to do. Because ultimately we're playing a game. So we took a break. I rang my mom actually during the break, and I told her what happened. And I was like, if this were a film or a TV series, this would be like the most diabolical stuff you'd watch. It'd be so juicy, but it would be so dark. But it kind of adds a bit more of a grip to it when it's something you're doing and something you're interacting with. But what I want to highlight, actually, I want to bring in Craig on this actually, is this was the point where Craig's character, Hester, decided that actually, I think we probably shouldn't just blindly follow these orders. And during the operation, Hester stayed outside. But Craig, can you like extrapolate on that a bit more?
Yeah, hello.
Hey,
My
Craig.
name's Craig.
Thanks for stopping by.
Yeah, oh, it's okay. Yeah, so my character Hester. Initially, I made her knowing that the First Aid group got up to some shady shit. Because, as Ben termed it, I heard some very juicy stories. But I think we did a couple of missions, as Ben described, where we were like, targeting insurrectionists in air quotes. And I started to think, and Ben talked about the origin of the Spartan Freeze, but the Spartan Freeze were given a choice, unlike the Spartan Twos, who were kidnapped and turned into super soldiers. The Spartan Freeze were given a choice to fight the Covenant, and Hester had seen her planet, her family, her friends killed by the Covenant. So I started to have this idea in Hester's mind that yes, she can follow orders, but she started to feel that they were being taken advantage of. And that's where, I think at that particular time, like when they botched the operation in that apartment, Hester wasn't like making a choice to be outside. I think, as a player, I was kind of like, probably be a good idea to have someone outside. So that's kind of, it came more from like a mechanics point of view of being like, hey, we don't have anyone keeping an eye outdoors. But I think it does fall in line with how Hester was starting to feel, and like thinking that maybe, she doesn't want to be in that room. As it is, I think when Ben was sort of describing, how they covered up what happened, which was I think they ended up throwing the bodies out the window. I described how to Hester almost those bodies were like static, like static view screen on a television. Like she blocked them out. She knew something awful happened, but she was trying to rationalize things and hide obscure things. But yeah, that frustration was mainly where I was going with the character at the time.
And what was really kind of good about this moment was the divide in the group had started, and we had Camp A, they are the enemy and they should die, and we had Camp B, we're being used. And this kind of thing kind of went on. So after this mission, they were told to, they were given orders via text on their head-up display, and they were told to laser designate a location. So they did. And they called in mortars on this location. And after the mortars started to hit, the radio said there was a guy that said, you're shooting at friendly, cease fire. And then the second round of mortars fired. And then the group realized, okay, shit, we've just fired mortars at a friendly position and we're killing our own guys. And there was this moment in they had an APC where two of the characters, Io and Mirabelle, are sitting in the back of the truck, and Io is also kind of in the same vein as Hester, as Craig's character, where they sign up to kill the enemy, not to kill humans, well, not to kill the UNSC. And as they're in, like, she's kind of disassociating, kind of staring off into the black, and Mirabelle just clicks the radio off. And for me, that was quite powerful because they're there like, okay, now we really know we're doing bad things, right? 'Cause we're killing allies now. And after that happened, they were given orders to move in and take out the survivors. And half of the group did it. Zero hesitations. Now, you might think, what does any of this have to do with PvP, Ben? Why are you bringing this up? Well, it's important you understand the backstory of this. We had Io and Hester were kind of leaning away from this, whereas Anton and Mirabelle were kind of leaning into it. Anton being Defan's character, Mirabelle being Shark's character, Io being Olivia's character, Hester being Craig's character. And they were kind of leaning into that. The squad had this split. And the game went on, and they were working with their Officer of Naval Intelligence officer, is a lady called Sergeant Adams. And the problem with Adams was that Io, as a character, is quite attached to Adams because Adams is nice to them. She treats them like people, not like tools and weapons, but she treats them like people. And this is where I got them. Because Adams really is just manipulating them into doing what Oni wants them to do. She's using them as a weapon to fight the insurrectionists. So eventually, the Tuesday group and the captain, they find out what illegal stuff the Thursday group have been getting up to. I'm not going to get into particulars as to how, but they do. And the Tuesday group are the planet at this point in the campaign. The planet's being glassed by the Covenant, and the UNSC are withdrawing. They're leaving the planet. But the other Oni captain and her ship had crashed near the glassing bunker, and the Spartan 2s were sent on a very desperate mission to go pick her up and leave before the planet gets glassed.
Ben, could I interject? Sorry,
No,
just briefly.
Yeah.
I just think it would be important to bring up the scouting mission to the Greener, because I think that was where I made a choice as a player. That
Yes, yeah, okay, feel free.
So a little bit before this, and it actually does tie in with this other Oni captain, I believe. The first day group was ordered to go to a mountain in quite a remote region of the map where there didn't really seem to be much activity going on at all. And we even talked about it with a couple of the other Spartan 3s, and they didn't really have much to say. It didn't sound like anything too big. So we were a bit blasé about it. We ended up going there. Ben was having us roll toughness, like we were getting fatigue, like it was a very arduous trek, which is nothing to us Spartans, really. We're there to do the job. But where things started to change was where we were fired upon by UNSC weaponry. Like we recognized it as UNSC defense turrets. And we ended up taking them out after getting wounded. But we then realized that we were scouting our own ship, the Greener, which had been a home base for both the Tuesday group and the Thursday group. And again, there's sort of that divide in the party. Like for some of them, it wasn't really a big deal. For others, it was. And for me, I think this is where Hester kind of snapped. Like this was completely unnecessary. And as, a child, because I did kind of, the Spartan 2s are also very young, but they have more indoctrination. But to Hester, the Greener was her home. So the fact that they'd been ordered to like scout this out, it was very strange. And that's where I made a decision which did impact the party. But Ben, I think you should continue with the captain because it ties into that. Sorry, I just
No, that's fine. That's fine. So I'd managed to get the group to kind of start thinking about or having them think the deeper questions. Why are we doing what we're doing? Why are we scouting our own positions? And should I be blindly following orders? And this is good because we all know war in real life is messy and it's violent. People die. And sometimes soldiers get told to do things that might not be right. Right now, if anyone that has served in the military, and some think that one of my players, Dax, in the Tuesday group, the Spartan 2s, originally they were given this mission, and without zero hesitation, he pretty much blurted out, "That's an unlawful order. You have an obligation to ignore that, to disobey that. You are obligated to disobey that." And he kind of said it mid-session, right? And that kind of made me go, good, okay, cool. He remembers what's right and wrong. But the Spartan Freeze, no, they liked Adams. They liked her a lot. And they did everything she said. Up until Hester realized this is bad and grew a bit of a conscience. Oh, well, that's a bad way of putting it. She didn't grow a conscience. She realized that they were being used and decided to do something about it. So, Adams finds out that they've been made, and she suggests to the group, we need to kill the captain because she knows. And if we kill her, we'll get away scot-free. And this is the moment, this was the ultimate divide. And this is where, but it's what my character would do, came into play. And we had this disagreement. So the majority of the group were like, yeah, let's go kill the captain. Sure, whatever. Not Craig. Craig didn't want to because Hester wouldn't do that. So I was like, okay, let's. I was delicate with this. I was like, let's workshop it. And as I was talking with Craig, and me and Craig had this whole conversation where he justified very clearly to me and to the group, out of character, this is why I wouldn't do this. I'm not going to do this. And they explained that I'm going to go to our captain and hand over all this evidence because this is what my character would do. And I realized I didn't have to pick which one happened. Both things could happen. So both things did happen. To jump forward, Spartan Freeze arrived there first. They kill the captain. They kill an NPC. And they also unknowingly kill 2 other NPCs that the group loved. Then the Spartan 2s arrive, find all the bodies missing. And then they find, because they're expert trackers, the treads of the Spartan Freeze. And they hunt them down. And what was really beautiful about this moment is this was on the 14th, it was on my birthday. All of the Spartan 3 players showed up to the session. Spartan 2s found them. And there was this magical moment where they had this back and forth conversation of, you've been made, just surrender, put your weapons down, come in peacefully. And rather than having the players roll like charm or command or to get them to actually surrender, I had them actually convince each other. And there was some really nice kind of like intelligent play here done by all the players because the Freeze realized, okay, we should probably surrender. We probably shouldn't fight them. They're our friends, they're our allies. And for 2s, I don't think for any moment in this instance, anyone thought about firing on each other because as players, they realized PvP is bad. Right. And we had 12 people in Discord. Could you imagine trying to do a 12-man Discord call PvP fight? It would have been horrendous. And so there was some really nice. Oh, you did, Dax. Yeah, I'm sorry. So there was some really nice kind of back and forth between the groups, and eventually it was Defen who was the one, because he's team leader, that opted to, hey, well, it's on me. Stand down. We're going to surrender. So they did. They surrendered. They came back aboard the ship. And as they got back aboard the ship, one of the NPCs they killed was Master Sergeant Brodswick. And he was the master sergeant of the Helljumpers, the ODSTs on the ship. So when they got back aboard the ship, there were 3 ODSTs in the hangar who were really pissed off to see them because they knew that they'd killed their master sergeant. So they start yelling at them to surrender and put their weapons down. One of the Spartan 2s, Blake, puts his arm up and he's like, we haven't been given, like, you guys stand the fuck down. Like, these are our prisoners. And there was this kind of whole back and forth, like, no, I'm telling you what to do. No, I'm telling you what to do. And Ben, Dax, said, well, let's talk to they've got orders. We've got orders. Let's just talk to the captain. Speaks to the captain. The captain says, no, they're going to jail. So pass them over. So they pass them over. Hell jumpers throw them onto a deck, strip them of their gear, and they get thrown into prison. And at this point, the players are they're struggling with it. I could feel that there was some kind of regret and there was some kind of remorse for what they did. And I think kind of at this point, they'd realized, shit, we just killed a bunch of NPCs the group liked. Everyone hates us right now. And they went to prison. And there was one moment where Shark was like, oh, can I speak to the captain? And I was like, no. But can I speak to him on video? No. Well, why? You don't have any rights anymore. You're in prison. You're a prisoner. I don't think you understand the gravity of the situation here. You're being done for treason. You've killed 33 friendly forces. Like, you are looking at life in jail or execution by firing squad, based on the.
I can interject once you're done.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Okay, so what I wanted to say was that this whole moment was kind of like to go into the character details. I was playing as a Spartan 3 Anton, who was the squad leader of the team. And the way I played Anton was pretty much sort of the reverse of what Hester was. Whereas Hester at some point decided, wait, why do we have to do this? Anton's whole background was that he was conditioned as a tool. So the big thing about Anton was he saw himself as a tool. He disassociated so much with everything that he did that to him, committing various atrocities does not faze him, because he is taught to think about logically that, oh, you did this horrible action, but it was to ensure the future. And he always had this sort of logical follow through that, yeah, sure, we killed a bunch of our own people, but it's to take revenge at the insurgents who screwed us over in the past, because the insurgents are also the enemy. And Anton's sort of deprogramming, if you will, happened during the incident with the captain, where I made it so that while Adams, who was just an Oni sergeant, she had this as a suggestion. The thing with Anton was that he still viewed it as an order because it came from a ranked individual. So she may have been like, maybe we should do this, but to him it was, go do this. It was basically the final product. It was like him being played and being used by Adams to the fullest extent. Like Adams fully exploiting the fact as to how he sees himself, as how Anton sees himself as a tool, that he would do anything if it's given to him as an order. And it was during the mission to assassinate the captain, where in a retaliation after being shot by Master Sergeant Broadswick in a fit of fight and flight, Anton gunned him down. And the only thing he could say, the last thing he said, pretty much for the entirety of it up until they were caught by the twos, was, "I am sorry, sir." He after executing the Master Sergeant, he just stood there motionless because he was broken. He was broken because he could not, as a individual who thought through logically and would always justify uh, the greater plan, the end goal, he could not justify in himself what killing the Master Sergeant would do for humanity, what killing the captain would do for the humanity. It was sort of the first time where he started being deprogrammed and he actually thought about things instead of just acting. It was him, the first sort of glimpse of humanity being restored to him, because up until that point, he was broken down to be a tool. And when the twos arrived and they found us, he at that point was just sort of wishing for death, really. And he saw the twos, he knew he couldn't do anything about it, and he ordered the others to stand down or we'll just go in silently. And basically, when the ODSTs got us, they handcuffed us, they they took our gear and threw us in prison cells. And Anton just stayed as a vegetable. There was nothing from me. It was just a corpse, basically.
And
so it was at that moment where sort of Anton's deprogramming and sort of restoration of humanity started to come through, which bled into everything what happened next.
And what was really good about this was my players started having, at the end of each session, the players started having moral conversations about, well, yeah, I mean, it's justifiable, right? Because it's for the bigger picture, right? Or no, that's wrong. We shouldn't do that. And like, they started thinking morally and critically about the things their characters were doing. And this is exactly what I wanted to achieve with this arc of the game. Was I really wanted to point out the moral and ethical implication of the Spartan program, using children to fight your war and then getting them to do your dark, dirty work is truly evil. And we were having these kind of moral debates and these disagreements because everyone in the group is on the scale of on the war crime scale differently, and there is a cutoff point there. Each player kind of has a point where there is a thing they will not do because it is wrong, and I loved this because it was great because they were seeing that even though Oni Space CIA is there to do things for the betterment of humanity and the greater good as the whole, on the macro, they look fantastic. But on the micro, they do horrendous things, and they were caught up in the middle of it. So, but Ben, how does any of this relate to PvP? Well, I'm going to get there now. So, they jump out of slip space, and they find themselves by a Forerunner planet. The ship gets attacked by a Covenant fleet, and we essentially point by point do the intro to Halo CE, except it's a Forerunner planet, not a ring. And I was having such a childhood, like, glow up during this session. Oh yeah, we also had 2 new players join who didn't know about any of the Black Ops stuff, and that was hilarious. Watching these 2 new players kind of piece together the "you guys did what" conversation. I think literally 1 session into the game for them, which was interesting. And they have like very different opinions, especially Watcher, one of our new players. He hates Oni, and he has like a very opposite opinion of this, which makes for an interesting squad dynamics. Anyway, they get released from their prison cells. The ship gets blown up, and this was the big, ending of the first season of my game. The Greener gets annihilated in orbit. Everyone has to run to escape pods, and they have this really aggressive and brutal exit from the ship. But they survive. And here is where the magic happened. Here's where the real narrative PvP happened. So the group lands on the planet via drop pods, and the discussion kind of comes up of Shark's character Mirabelle was going to kill Hester.
I think maybe you should rewind to the armory, Ben.
Yeah. I just thought about that. Yeah.
Apologies.
yeah,
I think the armory is
no, the armory
very
was
exciting incident. Yeah.
I'm trying to just not. I'm just trying to not yap as much about because we're excited about it because we played it, but the people watching didn't play it. So what they really needed are the
It's true.
footnotes.
It's true.
So when they were leaving the ship, they got to the armory and Adams was there, and they were intercepted by another character who was there to get Adams off the ship. And at this point, Adams was trying to leave, and this other character pointed a gun at the group and said, "Don't try it. Adams, come with me." And this character's in full power armor. They're not in armor because they're having to grab their equipment. And I was expecting the group to be intimidated enough by this character in full power armor to just let him have his way and take Adams. This is where Craig says, "No, I accept the consequences of my actions." I shoot her in the head. And I was like, what? And it was that moment where I was like, well, you're going to do what? It was like, I accept the consequences of my actions. And he rolls damage dice. And he kills her. And she dies. She explodes. But there was a problem with this because me and Olivia had already done a bit of DM role-playing about getting Adams off the ship. So I was like, okay, fuck. Player A has done something. Player B has done something. How do I not ruin their agency? And how do I still kind of maintain delicate balances? We had a bit of a stop. We had a bit of a compromise that we worked out because both Olivia and Craig are flexible people, and we spoke about it. And I think what's important here is that we communicated it and we spoke about it. So what happened is Craig's character still shot Adams. She got really wounded. But the Spartan shot Hester in the wrist, making her gun fire off from a distance, and was able to leave the ship or leave the armory with Adams. But the Spartan was only able to leave the armory because Io and Mirabelle, the other two characters, grabbed Hester and forced her to the ground. Again, because this is what their characters would do. And Craig said, no, that makes sense. I get it. That makes sense. So there was this consensual kind of grapple attack that they did in each other. And they pinned a character to the ground, and the other character was able to escape. And this is what started the conversation. Because now they were talking about, well, I would kill Hester right now. And I'm sitting there pulling my hair out. Because I'm like, shit, they're talking about initiating PvP. Now, I got really worried about this because we had a player a few years ago who was very nice guy, but he caused issues in the group, and there was one time where he initiated PvP. And as a young GM, I didn't know how to handle it, so I just kind of let it happen, and it caused problems. And I was really terrified of, I don't want someone to be upset. I don't want someone to be angry over what's happened. So I kind of put a stop to the game, and I was like, this is great narrative. This is such a betrayal. I love it, but also we're all here to have fun, and we had a conversation about it. So more time goes on. Craig, I believe, Craig, you said if anyone kills Hester, you get it and you'd be okay with it. I believe that was the point you said that.
Yeah, I did mention something like that because we previously had the conversation. You know, Ben has sort of like a Spartan free chat, so that was where we've been talking. You know, where Adams gave them the offer and suggested that they kill this captain. And that's where, you know, after thinking about it, you know, I said to the group, cards on the table, you know, veil down. You know, I don't think I can do this as my character. You know, it doesn't make sense. So we previously like had that discussion. And at that time, like, you know, I certainly wasn't thinking about PvP. I was thinking about, you know, character. But yeah, it had a big effect, Hester's decision, because, you know, Hester released that footage to the captain, so they knew about Adams. Adams was going to be shot. And as Ben said, Io and Mirabelle were a lot fonder of Adams than Hester was, because Hester had come to see Adams as someone who was using them as tools and using them just for Oni rather than UNSC. So yeah, I don't know. I just kind of said, yeah, I understand, because I kind of, and I don't know if you did too, Defin, but like as that session went on, I was just kind of into the narrative, and I was like, I guess more receptive, because we were, and then, the important thing is that we were talking about it. Like, did it slow down the game a bit? But it meant that like the actual RP we were having was so much more satisfying, because we knew what we knew what we were feeling as players. We knew we didn't want to hurt each other's feelings in real life, but we also knew that there was real conflict between our characters. And I think it was building and building as the session went on. It was quite intense.
Yeah, and we got down to the planet, so eventually they escape off the ship. I gave 2 new players, well, the one player, because Chris wasn't available, but I gave Watcher some time to roleplay because this was his second session, and I was very conscious that this whole betrayal arc was kind of wrapping up, but I wanted the new player to kind of still be able to interact and do something, right? So they get down to the planet, and as they land, Mirabelle turns her IFF off. Hester gets out of their pod and takes their helmet off and looks over the beach. And all I am told, as the GM, before this happens, is Shark saying, "We've DM'd each other." And I'm like, okay. I was like, and I gotta check my DMs. And I'm like, I don't see a DM. And this is where Shark painfully explains that she comes up behind Hester, puts the energy sword up against her, and says, it was along the lines of like, "I thought I could trust you, but obviously I can't," and puts the sword in her. And as the GM, I was so unprepared for what just happened. And she kills her. Hester dies. She puts her down on the beach and rolls her over. And Hester has this emotional, it's all very cinematic, talking about, why we didn't take their armor off. That's it. She asked if she could keep secrets, and she said no, right?
Yeah, there was, and yeah, like Ben said, Shark messaged me, and when Shark initially messaged me, she was like, "Oh, is it okay if Belle kills Hester?" And I was like, "Whoa, hang on." And so we kind of talked about it, and we were like, and I said, "Look, let's role play it, and we'll see how we feel. If you throw me a ball, I'll catch it and throw it back." And that's where, yeah, Belle got Hester in a grapple, had the sword, asked her if she would keep Oni secrets, and yeah, Hester said that she would spill 1,000 Oni secrets if it meant protecting humanity in the UNSC. And yeah, Hester died.
Mm-hmm. And in this moment, one of the last things that Hester said was, "When we were children, we saw monsters kill us from the shadows. But hang on, I quoted it.
I mean, I can remember if you want, but
it won't be aliens killing those children from the shadows.
Yeah,
it'll be us."
Yeah.
And then she passed away on the beach, and that, for me, kind of pulled it all together, because what was, to me, was the most impressive moment of this is that we had 2 players who came together and made the decision that we think that 2 players decided I want to really highlight this, 2 players decided we think PvP is the solution to this problem, and one of us is dying. And as Craig said, you give me a ball, I'll throw it back. And they handled it. But the only reason why this was successful and why this was such an amazing moment of, I want to say of cinema, but it's not, but in my head I was picturing it. It was an amazing moment of play between two people was only possible and was only achievable because we had, firstly, consent. Secondly, we had communication. And thirdly, we had amazing roleplay with character-driven goals and character-driven influence for this. And I think that is what made it acceptable. And after it happened, I kind of stopped and I was like, Craig, are you okay? And I was like, Shark, are you okay? Like, are we all good? And as I was going through, Olivia said, are you good? And I was like, I don't know. I was like, I don't know if I'm good because I'm trying to kind of, I didn't know it was coming, and I was trying to process what the fuck just happened. That was as much of a surprise for me as it was everyone else, and I think that's what really kind of made it a powerful moment for me, because as the GM, I had control taken away from me, which is usually what I do to them, and it was awesome. But we all know PvP is very volatile. It has the potential to be incredibly dangerous. It has the potential to make a player leave your table. It has the potential to anger and upset people. And it also has the potential to just put a stop to a game. And these are the things that I was really worried about, we have a lot of complex emotions in the first day group, right? And we have lots of complex themes going on, right? The Tuesday group, they get the fun of let's go kill hordes of enemies and capture objectives because that's the kind of game they have. The Thursday group get to talk about moral dilemmas and doing things in the dark. And it's kind of like a tonal whiplash, or like a tonal dichotomy between the two games. And it just worked so well, but it wouldn't have worked well if we didn't have fantastic players that were able to maturely drive a story, because ultimately that's what it was. The characters died as a story device. Betrayal happened as a story device, and it drives the narrative of the team together. Sacrifice, betrayal, blind loyalty to a war machine that hates you and just wants to use you as a weapon. But that is the direction and that is the path that the group have decided to take. I really didn't have much of a play in there, other than suggesting they do bad things. They made all the decisions. And this entire arc could have gone completely differently if they'd have said no to things, which they could have done. And there would have been some consequence. They would have lost their fire team. They would have lost their commander options, which may have helped drive their decision making. But other than that, they made the decisions to do all of these bad things, and it all kind of came to a boiling point when this PvP happened. We went from let's kill some insurgents on a planet to stabbing a trusted comrade literally in the back with an energy sword. And that happened over 4 months of time, and it really built nicely. And it's kind of shifted my opinion a little bit on PvP now, because I know that if handled correctly, it can be really good. But obviously, this kind of interaction between players it really depends on what kind of game we're trying to do and what kind of tone you're trying to do, right? I'm not suggesting, hey, have PvP in all your games, because that just doesn't make sense, right? Also, I never even told the group that PvP was an option, right? This kind of formed organically, and it kind of led to this point, which also helps make it more acceptable. I feel it's what my character would do, but in this instance, it was exactly what their characters would have done. and it just rolled out, and it made the session just so good, because it really helped, I think, put the final kind of nail in the coffin of war is hell, and they were stuck in the middle of it on a planet that they're probably not going to get off alone on a beach, and it was just a stressful 3 hours, but it was a good kind of stressful. And yeah, that was, you know,
It was a good pain.
It was a good pain, yeah. And that's how it all transpired, you know. So you know, I think, yeah, PvP is a tool in your GM's arsenal. You just need to know when to very carefully wield it, and when you do wield it, with great care. I think that's the best way to approach it. Killing NPCs, yeah, it's emotional, but when it's someone else choosing, that makes all the difference. So, and that's what happened. Bacon.
Yes.
Insights. I'm curious.
I got really wrapped up into the story of what you're saying, how things unfolded. It appeared to be an extremely organic outcome, specifically with regard to the PvP. I think, obviously, I would say the games that I've heard you talk about, as well as the one game that I participated in, very, very natural, very organic, and much like you, I would chalk that up to the players themselves. I would also say that it's the GMing, because you really are a capable GM in that you form it. You know, you dump everyone into a pot and see what happens in the pot, how these interactions take place, but you really build a damn solid pot, and to dumb it down a little bit, I guess. So I have a hard time, much like you described, I have a hard time wrapping my head around that decision that I would make in a game where I go and infringe upon someone else's, sovereign decision-making capability by attacking them or, killing them, putting a sword in their gut and leaving them for dead. I have a hard time wrapping my head around that, because the way that I prefer to role play is very in character. I participated in, and obviously I didn't know the system, so there was a little bit of, or maybe even a lot of bit of table talk that I had participated in and even instigated, because there were things that I just didn't know or needed to know, and it was a very casual, very friendly game. But even still, because of that taboo, because of that, it's almost like a barrier where you run up against it and you're like, in the circumstance, it's a very, your players take actions that are very risky for the sake of placing themselves in the moment, and having already this history of black ops actions that they've undertaken, and accounting for that. I mean, and this is really just a bunch of scatterbrained commentary. This isn't really insightful like you asked for. It's just it's really just observation. It's kind of it's a little bit fractured, so apologies for that.
No, that's fine.
But just the way your players are able to do that in the moment, the way that you're able to allow them to do that, the way that you know, even the recipient of the in-game violence. I mean, that's like Craig. Your character was I mean, you died, right?
Yeah.
So now you're either rolling up a new character, but like you have
Yeah.
to sit with that, and so I want to know, like, the shock that you experienced as the player had to have been similar as the shock that your character was experiencing in just being stabbed in that moment.
Oh,
that
for sure. Definitely. Yeah. I think a big part of it, and I thought about this a little bit, is, like Ben said, there was clear communication and consent, like, throughout this. And we started that conversation before PvP was even on the table. It was when we were discussing, like, what do we do next? And that was where, like, as a player, I was like, hey, yeah, like, I don't want to take away people's agency.
Right.
But I also want to be true to my character. And I think, Ben has created an environment where people feel comfortable to be expressive with their characters. And, it's something some people have experience with, and it's something that some people come to sort of over time. But I think I've played in quite a few games now. Not a lot of systems, mind, but I've been playing D&D for over 10 years.
Sure.
Which is not a long time compared to some people I know.
Well, you don't have to qualify it. 10 years is a long time. 10 years is long enough to be an expert.
But in that time, I've seen it go wrong, and I know that Ben's seen it go wrong. So when it popped into my mind that this might be a thing, I knew that either Ben was going to say, no, this is not going to happen, or we were going to sit down as players and say, okay, this is what we're comfortable with, then as characters. And I think you can only achieve good PvP through experience, either just the experience of role-playing games in general, or through both that and the experience of bad PvP. Because the last thing I want to do is hurt the party, hurt the players, make them walk away thinking, I've just done this because I want to win the game. I've unfortunately experienced that. So it just occurred in a very organic way. And I think that's the important thing. Like, it wasn't really a spur of the moment thing. I mean, I guess that's not technically true. Like, the decision was made in a relatively brief amount of time, but it's like when you're in that moment, it doesn't really feel so spur of the moment because you've had time. Ideally, you've had time to sit with these characters and understand why they're making the decisions they're making. So, when Shark came to me, saying, I think Mirabelle will kill Hester, I was like, let's role play it and see where it goes. And when Mirabelle asked that question, can you keep secrets? There was a part of me that was kind of like, I could just say yes. And then, like, that can fester, like that can be a continuing party conflict.
Yeah, I've had experiences in my youth where that has definitely been the case.
Yeah, but it felt like such a conclusion. And as Ben said, like that was the end of our arc, as it were. We're now, in this different zone. It felt like such a bittersweet conclusion to tell the truth, and a very You know, I sort of think of it, you know, almost in like an Eddard Stark way, you know, choosing to do the right thing and die. Obviously accepting the consequences for that yourself, but also unknowingly the consequences for the future. You know, obviously Hester doesn't know what's going to happen to the team afterwards.
Is that something that is present at the table as well? Like once you died, that was it. You hung up and you were gone, and so you don't really get to experience the aftermath of the character death.
I mean, you know, my character is dead, but I was still in the call.
Okay,
I mean,
okay.
I had to take a step away because it was it was intense.
Oh, sure. That's actually something I'd like to address as well, but please continue first.
But no, I was there like a like a ghost, watching the team try and survive on this new alien planet, and that was very interesting as well because, you know, obviously there was that absence of my character, and that's going to be a thread, but at the moment there is survival. So yeah.
It's good you mentioned survival, because my initial plan was for the arc was that we're gonna land on the planet and they were all at each other's throats, but they had to survive. The plan was that I was going to use survival as a game mechanic, like ludically, to remind the players that they are a unit and that they work together, and that they would forget that they hated each other in character, because they had to focus on the immediate survival right now, and it would allow the team to heal. And it would allow that now everyone knows each other's true colors. They know who they really are, and they'll learn to get on with each other. That was what I wanted to do, but instead, we had this beautiful moment of betrayal that happened, and I think it just escalated it and made it 10 times worse, because now, you know, Hester's dead. And yeah, it you know, it was strong for everyone. You know, Craig said, no, I'm just going to observe, and you know, didn't even roll up a character. He just sat, you know. I mean, in Mythic, it takes like, with the XP they're at, it takes about an hour to make a character. So,
and I should say, you know, in terms of like sitting there, like we did pause after that, and Ben talked to all of us, and also because, you know, I recognized how intense it was, I did message the group, because I was like, hey, that was pretty intense, and you know, it was good to touch base afterwards to make sure that everyone, you know, was sitting comfortably with it. And it's kind of like, you know, to me it was I mean, you know, we joke, you know, but it was a good pain. Like, it felt awful, but it was so fitting. It was unexpected. It wasn't what we planned, but it happened organically. So I look upon it, you know, very fondly. Like, I'm going to remember it for a long time.
Yeah. As a GM as well, I think it sits in that highlight moment for me. Go on, Devin.
I just want to add, I just can't help but laugh at it. But when everyone thought that, you know, we'll be back to business, I just shoot Ben a DM or a combat account, and I'm like, kill me, do it, murder me.
Murder me. Yeah, because he was getting Anton was getting pretty lit up in the firefight, and he was like, "Do it, end me." So I did. I put a sniper round through Anton's head and killed him, and this was only about 30 minutes after Hester had died. So the group got slapped with another death.
How long was the break between the death and then resuming play?
We had about, I want to say 5-10 minutes. We just spoke about, we just kind of spoke about it. And I, as a safety measure, I wanted to make sure that Shark and Craig didn't hate each other, and that there wasn't going to be any kind of out of character resentment Because if there would have been resentment, I would have just Control Z'd the entire thing and had Hester come back to life, and I would have just like forcibly and abruptly deleted that entire chapter and then re-gone from there. Because the last thing I want is my players to have resentment for each other. You know, we're all people, and we're all humans, and we all feel things, and I didn't want that to be an issue remotely in my server. I put a lot of effort into making sure that everyone gets along, and we just talked about it, but it wasn't for too long. I think they rolled on the random encounter table. They got really fucked by it because they bumped into a Covenant patrol at an outpost that severely outnumbered them. And they did a good job engaging it, but they took hits, and unfortunately, Devin told me basically he wanted his character to die. So I did a bit of a cinematic where his character got shot in the head, and he had a heroic last stand where, as he was dying on his deathbed, they gave him some weapons. So enemy reinforcements were landing, and we didn't have time to move him or heal him. And as they were falling back, he took out as many as he could before detonating a plasma grenade on himself to take out.
Reach.
Yeah, exactly. Did a reach. As they were fleeing.
So kind of like combined Cat's death from Halo Reach with a Noble 6.
Yeah. And it was...
with the exception that my character, despite getting headshot, he still yapped for like 2 minutes because I had a rough idea of what I wanted to say, but I didn't script it. So I had an ABC thing I wanted to say, but I improvised everything. Everything that came from my mouth was 1 second of thought, like a thought train that was going rapidly, and I just said things as they came to my mind, which apparently worked, even though to me sounded like an incoherent babbling. But it
was great. I think it, obviously the PvP happened in that session, but I think it was the whole session. Like, sometimes when you're playing a role-playing game, you're just going to have that session where the good things, like mechanically, the dice tell a story, the players tell a story, and you just kind of get swept up in it. And last Thursday was one of those sessions. And I think you just have to roll with it. You have to just kind of, be in that moment, experience it together, and it's very compelling. Yeah.
So I intended for my character to die. I knew that this would be the story arc, that he would have died somehow. And when Craig's character died, I thought to myself, because the current character that I had now had a thing going on with Shark's character via using, there's a talent in the game called Unbreakable Bond. And there was sort of like character backstory that Belle, Shark's character, was Anton's shield. She's built like a tank. She is really large for a Spartan 3, and she is the muscle. And I like doing these with other players. In fact, I think Craig, not to go too off topic, but Craig, I think we did something similar in the first Dead Space game. And I thought it would be really nice to go and do that again. So I was like, hey, if my current character dies, do you want to do something with our next 2 characters? And I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to expedient my death, because that encounter was totally survivable. I was just like, yep, this is the perfect GM. Murder me, do it.
I tend to play games in a very fatalistic fashion as well. I usually, when I roll up a character, I will do my best to get in the headspace of the character and actually be that person. But I always, I guess, as the player, sort of expect to meet some sort of untimely end. whether it's by PvP or just the luck of the dice, or unluck of the dice, or some sort of scenario where I die. And I think that it's very interesting having Craig, who was not expecting it at all whatsoever, and having to deal with the magnitude of that loss. Because there is a grieving process, right? So you haven't lost anything or anyone tactile or tangible, but there's a grieving process that you go through depending on the type of game, how intense it is, how into that character's head that you get. They're your companion for however long the game goes on, and so there's a bit of loss that you experience, and there's that which Craig had experienced, at least according to the answers that he gave and the description of the situation. And then, Dethin, who gave up, I'm not going to say gave up, but who sort of surrendered a character willingly, which is 100% my mode of play. Like when we were in the Dead Space game, just to relate it to something that I have, that I can use. I'm not trying to steal a spotlight. This is just
absolutely. No, this makes sense.
But I had expected to die, and in fact,
me too, man.
For not having died in very specific situations where I should have, that actually put me on edge. So I was on edge for the whole rest of the campaign. I should have died with a drive shaft through my chest, or I should have died with a broken neck, or there are 2 or 3 different ways I should have died that I didn't die. And it kept me on edge because my expectation, or at least my, I'll say the application of my particular play philosophy, is that it's temporal, it's going away, I'm going to die. It's not very frequent that I get into a campaign where I'm actually able to invest in a character the way that you were able to in this situation, Craig. And so I find that loss particularly fascinating. It's more delicate. There's more nuance. There is an abruptness to it that is just it's pretty horrifying. I think that's an appropriate way to view the loss. It's sad. It's a vacancy. It immediately, it evacuates, and there's nothing that rushes to fill it. You kind of just sit there for a moment, through the description. Again, this isn't something that I've experienced in a role-playing game, I'll say, but everyone experiences their losses in life, and so we can commiserate and we can at least understand and relate, and so I can do that. But it's one of those things where role-playing gives you this opportunity to experience these sort of less personalized, imaginative scenarios where Ben, as the GM, or any GM, but in this case Ben, kind of forces you to confront. And Ben, you didn't kill him, and I get that. Shark did, but you provided the imagined space and the opportunity and the scenario and the almost the permission, right? Because you guys sat down and you had this discussion about what was acceptable, what was not acceptable. You had your session 0, you had your social contract, and so all of these things ended up being permissible. Even still, it was a shock when it happened. And role-playing allowing us, through PvP, because that's for later. We can get into that later. It gives you an opportunity because the GM is this external force. They don't exist in your head. Because the other players are external forces, you don't know what they're thinking. You don't know how they're going to behave. You don't know how they're going to react. And sometimes you get yourself into this situation that is genuine, that is not just someone going, oh, well, this is how my character would react, or someone just immediately trying to legitimately undermine Pardon me, I have a cat hair on my nose that will not quit. So like just trying to undermine the group, right? Because that's what they're getting a kick out of. They just really like sitting down at a table and being a total jerk and not really role playing. This was different, right? So this was a scenario where you had all sat down and agreed to it beforehand. You had all brought the game to a point in a very natural way that this was a possible resolution. And it happened this way. And it's a very trying to find the right words for it. It's just, I mean, interesting. I'm going to say interesting. What a boring fucking word. But it's like
it's compelling.
Compelling. Also satisfying too. Even though you were dead in the moment, right? Even though you died, it's still satisfying. That's an experience that you have that you'll carry with you. And I've experienced the way you role play, and so I have no doubt that you were in this person's head. You were this person as they were experiencing this betrayal, as they were dying. That's a very powerful, almost real. I'll stop short of real, right? But it's a very powerful sort of experience.
That bleed fairy.
Yeah. I have things to say about bleed, but
I'm not sure if you're for or against it. I get the feeling you're against it.
I am not entirely sure.
Yeah. I mean,
it's necessary. I think that it does happen. I think that there are definitely situations and scenarios where you will carry emotions in with you, and you will take emotions from the situation. I'm just not entirely convinced that it's necessary as a concept, but this is based on the analysis that I'm currently doing, and so that's possibly not a fair. That's not really a fair.
Okay, yeah. Because that's what I was going to argue with it. Is I think in this instance there was a nice application of bleed for the players, and I think that's what allowed it. What helped enable it. I think what Mike is saying, I wonder what principles we could extract from this experience for other PvP instances.
The 3 C's you said earlier.
The 3 C's, what
consent, communication. It might have just been 2, but I think communication, consent are probably the.
You say free. You say because the 3 C's of game design is camera, computer, controller. And
okay.
It's camera, controller, character. And I was like, what the fuck? I was like, why are you bringing that up? I think communication, consent, and it's you need to have
maybe control.
No consideration.
No? Yes, that's more appropriate.
I think it's really important because you have to understand the gravity of what you're doing. I think it's important that if you're going to initiate PvP, you're potentially ending another character, and if you've been in a long form game, that's going to cause damage. It's important that both players are consenting to the action. I mean, as long as the players both say, "Yeah, okay, I would like to do this," then it's as a GM, as long as you are playing with adults. They've made a decision. They have made a choice. They have both agreed to it. Whatever happens now, it's in God's hands, right? Whatever they can.
And I agree with that. And this will I'll loop back to sort of reinforce some ideas that I've stated in other streams that it's really important to vet players, especially if you're planning on this sort of gravity within a game.
Yeah.
They have to be able to role play effectively. They have to be able to be in that moment. They have to be this is not a situation there's no tension breaker here, right? If you are the sort who is going to crack a joke that's completely off subject and out of game in a moment like this, it's not going to be received well, I think, by anyone. And so, I'm getting into the details. I don't mean to get into the details, but
That's fine.
there are ways to vet your players, or you should vet your players, especially if you're going to be experiencing situations of this type of gravity. How do you vet the players? Great question. I'm sure there are ways to do it. Maybe like single session role plays. I don't know. We don't need to get into that.
Yeah, I with my play space becoming more of a public like role playing area now, with more and more groups coming in, vetting players has become more of a important thing for me, because you need to ensure that the players are going to meld with the group. And I put out an advert for for one new player actually, for my Mythic game, and I had nearly 50 DMs, and it was terrifying just how many people reached out.
Wow.
And actually, the day after I'd already chosen my 2 players, not one, the co-writer for the system asked if he could join.
Wow.
So that was very humbling, and that was very kind of, well, not humbling. It was an ego boost. I'm gonna say exactly what it was. It was one hell of a fucking ego boost.
Yeah, sure.
I made
I am a little
sure-
shocked that you're trying to replace Craig so soon after the death.
No. Never,
I'm kidding.
never replaced Craig. If we got rid of Craig, the group would be uncontrollable and would nuke a hospital or something. They would commit heinous acts against the Covenant, right, Defin?
What? Yeah.
Yeah. And it's. I spoke to each of the new potential players. Well, I wanted to make sure the people I was adding to the group fit, and they do, right? And it's let us off. Let us do Oni's dirty work. It's important that you do that, because if you have people that don't gel with the group, it does cause issues. And the last thing you want to do is have an argument break out. Or the last thing you want is for someone to say something inappropriate. For example, I have had, I forget what session it was, but something serious was happening, and someone made a comment or made a joke about something or said something during this moment, and I just completely disregarded what they said, and I just continued narrating, because it was in that moment. It was like, no, this is what you should be paying attention to.
Yeah. That's what you should do. That's what you should do.
Being a teacher, I think it kind of second nature to me. I can just do that in the classroom.
You're very good at using a teacher voice.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
I think that's maybe something you grow as a GM as well. The more you learn to run games.
Yeah, it's important to remember, and I think for any GMs that are watching, it's important to remember that this is your game, and you are in charge. And obviously, that power comes with great responsibility. You shouldn't be, a dictator, but it is your game, and you are the arbiter of the rules, and you can say no. And as long as you can justify that no to a player, they have to kind of just deal with it, as long as you can justify it and it's fair. And that's the ultimate skill of being a GM, is trying to work out how can players do things without their agency being stripped, right? So they still have meaningful play, but you're in charge ultimately, and you should never forget that. But how you wield the sword of control is up to you. Some GMs like to be loose and lax. But for me personally, because I'm a tension creating, anxiety rolling horror machine when it comes to running games, that's all about control and restriction of resources and restriction of agency. Mm-hmm. So you have to learn to kind of delicately balance the tools of destruction, because ultimately your players are coming to play a fun game, and it has to still be fun. And I think from what the group, kind of the general kind of aspect I get, or the general kind of mood I got from that session, was it was great, and everyone enjoyed it. Regardless of the bad things that happened, ultimately everyone had fun, which means I succeeded as a storyteller. I was able to cultivate an environment where absolute cinema, hands in the air, was able to happen. And that for me was the ultimate achievement. And we've had several moments like that happen in this campaign.
I do want to add real quick in terms of GM. I know this is probably me stating the obvious, but I think it does warrant saying it. Now, I haven't GM'd, I'm not GM, but I have read the horror stories online. You can very easily search them up. I think it's very important as a GM. You do have, how do you call it, a sort of control, but you have to wield it responsibly because you don't want, you have power, I guess would be the way to say it. You don't want to abuse it towards your players because at the end of the day, you're a storyteller, you want to tell a story, but at the same time, you also want your players to enjoy the thing you're creating and have fun while experiencing it and participating in it, and also allowing the players the ability to interact, change, and just engage in how the story is told. Because there's a lot of horror stories that I've read and seen of this just not being respected, and it causes the entire session to just collapse. So I think it's important noting this.
Absolutely. And we've still got many of these moments to come, right? They're trapped in this survival, situation, and who knows what horrendous, desperate thing they're gonna have to do next. And that is the environment I have created for this setting, and making the players have to start thinking externally outside of the game. Shit, how are we going to survive? Then you've really nailed it. I think that's when, but it shows your players care. None of this could be remotely successful if none of them gave a shit, but they do, right? And this is something that's difficult to achieve in a short time. And what I thought was really good about the Dead Space game we did was the characters, the players, were able to very quickly create interesting characters that had fleshed out backstories and interacted with each other like they knew each other for a long time. And there was kind of that kind of fluid, organic character interaction. And all of that helps because then you can brutally murder them and people care, right?
Yeah, I'm sure we never finished that one.
Yeah, I know. But hey, look, Easter's coming up soon, and I always run a game over Easter. So all I'm saying is, Bacon, you're invited.
Oh, well, thank you. As long as Easter's really easy to get time off. So, as long as I have dates and times, I'd be happy to participate.
Yeah.
If we're doing another Dead Space game.
No. It won't be Dead Space. It'll be something else. Probably Alien, probably.
Yeah, I'm very excited to participate. Just get me the, when we get closer or when give me the dates and times, and I'll, the sooner the better, so I can
absolutely
put the time off in. But
we've all got to adults.
Just to go on a small side tangent, because it's just on my mind. Being that Space game was really fun. I really liked the different character interactions, and I think the best part for me was the dichotomy between the different characters. Of most of the characters you've had, they were basically like you had one who was kind of free. He was a space trucker essentially. I think that was your character, Bacon.
Yeah.
You had other people who were like working for EarthGov, kind of belligerent, just trying to make ends meet. And then I remember my character, who was just a mercenary who was just having the time of his life.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a nice contrast.
And my guy was just sad.
I was just
you had this way of expressing the ocean of sadness in his actions, but just maintaining the most like plucky sort of attitude, which made it that much more sad.
Yeah,
because it was you're great, and I could talk up your particular style of role playing for
I'm very,
a million years.
very
to denigrate anyone else. Role playing in that game was fantastic. Dethin
We
You
all
were
really
awesome.
clicked.
Everyone was awesome, but you really struck a
we
chord
already
with me.
clicked. I really
Yeah.
appreciate that.
I,
Yeah.
I will second that. I think that Dead Space game was the third session that I played with Craig. Correct me if
Second, I
I'm wrong.
think. Yeah, second.
Might
Because we
be,
did
yeah.
another Dead Space one. I remember that one.
Okay.
Yes,
And-
the power of friendship.
Yeah, we had a thing where I think it was Craig who said, "Hey, Dethan, do you want our characters to have a thing?" I was again playing the character of a squad leader. It was actually my first time. Well, in my limited experience of being a player in these systems, I decided to roll a squad leader character, and it was Dead Space. So of course, fuckery would happen. Oh no, what have I done? Um, it was really interesting, and I think like Craig did he's very good at either making you really happy, sock puppets type of deal,
Oh
or
yes,
man,
yes.
I'm so fucking sad now.
I think it's just, and there's nothing unique about this perception, but and I'm very grateful for those. That's very, yeah, that's very nice to hear. I think I just view role playing as, we're sitting around together telling a story, and I don't know. I really like to try and play off people and like encourage people to, um, to like engage with a hook. And sometimes that means my character, I like play him a bit weaker or that kind of thing. But it's because, I think it's just very interesting and a very unique experience to just get to have this collaborative environment together. And yeah, there's like a big improv thing for it, and I think that's a muscle you develop the more you play role playing games. And it's just very interesting because I don't have uh like an acting environment, but I think role playing games through their mechanics, they facilitate some moments where you're like, wow, I just, like with my character in Dead Space, so it's kind of like, okay, um I thought about going to like the Church of Scientology, that kind of thing, but I was like, I kind of have this opportunity to make a character that's like got this bravado on the outside, but he has this just deep sadness inside, and I was kind of um surprised by the amount of like and hopefully I'm using this right, or my English literature teacher will appear through the screen and slap me. I think I was surprised by the amount of pathos I was able to put in that moment, like sympathy for that character, and that was, yeah, like like I said earlier, like sometimes you just get caught up in a game, and I don't know if that's that bleed theory you were talking about, Ben, but it's like you kind of just roll with it, roll the punches, roll with what people sort of throw to you, and encourage people to join in, because I think role playing games are at their best when everyone feels comfortable to engage in it, and not everyone is going to approach that in the same way. I know that I'm very different to some players because that's, I struggle with numbers sometimes, so like mechanics sometimes are a bit of a issue for me. But it's like we're all approaching it in the same way, but ultimately we're all telling a story together. And great things can emerge from that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry for the ramble.
No, that's a good one.
I would say, just to kind of like follow up a bit, um, I only really recently, like maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, started doing role playing stuff. It's definitely been a learning experience. But something that I found out is that I really enjoy being part of a story, and if it means I can tell something interesting, then if my character needs to die for it, then so be it. If it makes for an interesting spectacle, if it makes for a good story point. In fact, I actually did this for the first time in my very first session. Ben, I think you remember one of the first campaigns that I played with you, the Darkest Dungeon campaign.
Yeah.
Yeah. I played a character who was um, basically a paladin. And his quirk was that he was a kleptomaniac, and that supposedly he was sent on this expedition to go investigate this place. Just kind of abridging it real quick. And he technically wasn't. He stole something that belonged to the church, and he also stole the spot of what was supposed to be another paladin's seat. So he kind of came in to, escape the authorities, so to speak. And when that character essentially died, I was like, okay, what's the thing that I can do to both add to the overarching story, but to also add to continue on top of it, was that, oh, I know, he would throw the item that he stole from the church away before dying. And in order to kind of follow up with a whole telling a story with a character dying, I made my second character his motivations were the consequence of the first. He was a bounty hunter who was specifically sent to hunt down the rogue paladin. That was his motivation. Unfortunately, the session didn't manage to go for that long, so that didn't really get to play out. But it was sort of the first time I did that, and I found myself really enjoying doing these type of things to kind of build up on the story. I always like to, if I can, I want to contribute to the story en large, sorry. In any shape, way, or form. And if that means I have to kill one of my characters and simply recreate a new one, that's absolutely fine. Although I will end it by saying this, creating a character in Mythic is a pain in the arse. Yes, too many numbers.
Oh yeah, the time
Anyways,
period.
sorry, I'll end my rambling here.
Well, any thoughts, Beacon?
No, I think that this was absolutely fascinating. The juxtaposition of Dethin's approach to Craig's approach. Being able to sort of admire the maturity with which the situation had unfolded, despite there being pretty negative consequences within the game and potentially at the table, but that doesn't seem like that was even really a possibility provided the players. Do any of you have anything additional to add to the experience, or is it like, does this make you guys want to possibly avoid PvP in the future? Does it make you want to incorporate it more in the future? Is it something that should not really? Is it something that should be discussed and accepted in those groups where it is acceptable, but not really driven toward, right? Like, because if you have, if you have a Hester every game, it's going to lose its impact. There's not going to be any emotional death. There's absolutely going to be there's going to be an emotional fall off. It's going to trip and fall face first off a cliff. So, like, I'll leave it at that. What's your input on that? Is this something that should be, like, obviously these emotional moments, these milestones that are going to stay with you for probably ever, they should be driven toward, like, that's the goal, or one of the major goals of role play, from my view.
Yeah.
But how do you do that without, inviting humdrummery, right? How do you do that and maintain a consistently high level of satisfaction and, emotional payoff without bottoming out? Go ahead.
I will say, as a player, I would say this is PvP is something that you can only really do. It's very situational. It's circumstance as well. It can be used to tell a great story as to what happened with Hester's character and all that. But other than this, it's also very player dependent. Like if you have players who, which I think is normal. I think each one of us. I know I had to fight off this urge to be the quote unquote main character. I think that's prevalent. Prevalent. It's something that you have to contend, and I think that adding PvP, it's just very situational. Like you have, I see, like I think as a GM, trying to think as a GM, Ben can probably explain it a lot better than I can. You have to be able to know your players, or if you're with a new group of players, you have to figure out, I don't know, maybe like prod it, like kind of figure out where they stand on it as a potential before you commit to it, because every player will react differently to it. And I think if you're doing it with a group that you know more, a group of close, like let's say close IRL friends, I think it's much easier to execute because everyone at the table knows each other, rather than doing it with some strangers that you found online. It's something that is very difficult to do and very situational, is what I will say. Very situational.
Yeah, definitely. No, I'd completely agree with that, and I think that it's. I don't think it's necessarily something to seek out. I mean, it's entirely possible that it might be what a party wants, and as a GM and as players, you should get a feel for your group, and if that's what they want, then more power to you. But in terms of making sure that we sort of have those heights again, I think the best answer, honestly, is that don't go seeking them. In all honesty, like that's my honest. I think it's being pretty honest. It's like trying to force great moments. It's not going to happen.
Agreed.
It happens organically, because of the GM, because of the players, because you get to know each other, whether you've known each other before or you get to know each other through the game. And obviously, as a GM, you should be confident that the players are there for your story and the way you run things. And you shouldn't worry about trying to top, like, oh shit, like last Thursday was so great. Like, how am I going to top that? It's like, it's okay to not. And it's better to not seek that, because the chasing perfection is just going to break you. But having an organic moment like we did, like you said, that's going to last forever, and that is just going to happen with time. In all honesty, I think when I was younger, I used to look at like the green text like RPG stories a lot, and being like, wow, like these are so amazing, like the All Guardsman party and all this stuff, like, wow, this would never happen to me. And it's kind of like, well, no, it didn't happen to me, but I've got my own stories. I've got my own stories that made me laugh, made me cry. I have horror stories, but most of them are great. And I think PvP is part of the arsenal, but it's just part of the arsenal. And like everything, it's something you need to carefully consider, knowing your party, knowing how you run a game. Yeah.
It's a very good answer.
I echo everything Craig has said.
Yeah, same.
Well, awesome. I think that's a pretty decent sentiment to leave off with, unless there's more that you guys had that you wanted to discuss.
I think we've touched on it really nicely. we've all came from our approach for it. And I think thanks to both my players being out, being happy to come talk about it, but also being able to kind of debrief and kind of talk about it in a more vulnerable way, I think is has highlighted just kind of how it worked and why it worked. So thank you both, and thank you, Bacon, for allowing my players to come and add to the program.
Well, thank you very much, all of you, for coming. Thank you for those who came in the chat. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Dethan. Thank you, Ben, as always. This has been fantastic. If there is ever a session that you guys kind of want to sit down and discuss on a platform, I am very, very happy to discuss any of the situations that take place within your games. If it's just like if it's something that you guys want to discuss, then come on over. It's real easy to schedule something. Put it together. I know that we're getting or we are pretty late for you guys, but it's an open invitation. It's an open invitation. So this was great. It touches on some themes that Ben, you had discussed wanting to talk about, not as robustly, but it's there, right?
Mm-hmm,
so now we have sort of segues into other topics.
Mm-hmm.
It's touched on things that I am currently, in the middle of analyzing. Craig and Dethan, it was awesome to talk to you guys both again. The last time we spoke was, I think, after the final session of the Dead Space game. It's been great having you here, hearing your opinions, hearing your different styles, your different approaches, your different perspectives on the game, how things shook loose. I thought this was fantastic. I thank you for sharing the stories. I thank you for sharing the perspectives. And specifically with regard to PvP, it's very, I think that it's on the more mature side of the role play experience, right? You have to be able to engage with it in a very mature way, and
absolutely.
It's so common to discuss or even just mention PvP in games, and you are bombarded with those who say, yeah, it's okay, I want to kill my friends, and you're bombarded with the anti sentiment, which is, no, everyone's there to engage in the game, you can't take someone's agency. And it's like, well, you can, in a very not planned, but in a very well role-played scenario, in a very natural, organic, and it takes everyone contributing. It takes everyone's permission. It takes everyone's participation to really do it effectively. But it can be like the payoffs, the emotional payoffs, satisfaction can be some of the best that you can experience while role-playing. So I don't think that there's really I don't think being by default for or against PvP in roleplay is a leg to stand on. I think that if you are in a situation, if you're in a group where you can explore this type of roleplay, and if you allow it to happen, it can provide, again, like I said, those emotional payoffs and that satisfaction, like it has here, quite obviously, which is no surprise, provided the GM and the group of players. I am entirely unsurprised that you all treated it the way that you did, and you all got, the different things that you got out of it as you did. And it's still going to pay forward, right? Like you're still in the game. You're still going to have other sessions. Hester's not going to be there, right? So there are going to be these sort of paid forward circumstances, or remember when Hester said this, or what would Hester do? Like, it's going to affect the characters. It's going to affect the players and the characters, which is just awesome.
We have had instances with the previous team leader, Sable, when she died, heroically sacrificing herself to destroy the reactor on the Covenant vessel. When they were on the planet and they linked up with Adams, and she was speaking to, was it Hester? I think it was Hester or Anton. It was a new member of the team. And Adams realized what team they came from, and she said, okay, tell Sable I'm on my way. And they stopped and said, Sable's gone. And then she said, okay, tell Jason I'm on my way. Jason's gone too. and she kind of hardened up and was like, okay, all right, I'm just gonna stop asking questions now and I'm just gonna go over and meet them. So we've had moments like that happen. and there are so many more to come. I mean, in the Halo timeline, we're only at 2533 and the war ends 2558. So there's still a tremendous amount of time for these kind of pocket moments to happen. So as my my kind of closing comment, delicacy is making sure it's done delicately, make sure it's done delicately, and to not force it.
Sorry, PvP is like it's like fugu.
Delicious.
It's like
it's like fugu.
Fish. If you don't take out the toxic organ, it will kill you.
It will kill the game.
But if you remove the toxic organ by consent and discussion, it's delicious.
PvP
That is a very good.
So we're going to end on Blowfish.
Yep. Thanks, Craig.
Yeah.
PvP in role-playing is like the Blowfish. Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Bacon. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Yeah, I think we can wrap up here then. Actually wrap up here instead of me saying we're going to wrap up and then not doing so. Thank you all in chat. Thank you for the players who arrived in chat who didn't, come in to discuss live. Thank you to Craig and Dethin and Ben, as always. I will look forward to having you on in the future. However frequently you are available or want to come on, as I said, it's an open door. This was an awesome discussion. And I'm sure that there will be other discussions that we have about PvP and about, character death and whatnot moving forward. So thank you, everyone, again, and we'll see you next time. I don't know when the next video in the series is coming out. I have some stuff that I need to get together on solo play. So once I get that together, it'll come out. I guess I'm going to try to do it on Friday, but we'll see. We'll see. It depends on the time I'm able to make for it, because there is now another personal project that I've begun to try to wrap up. But this one I only have a week to do, so it shouldn't be that big of a deal. But whatever. You'll see me soon, and we'll talk to you all then. Thank you, everyone, and I'll see you later.
Super. Thank you, Bacon.
Yes.
Bye, everybody.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.